Hey you all, Farmer Jesse here. I've been wanting to do this video for a while, but I also wanted to get a lot of experience with the Winstrips before I really weighed in on them, but I'm going to do it today. I'm going to kind of give you the rundown of Winstrips. This is a specific kind of seed starting cell tray that I want to talk about because they're a little bit expensive, and I want to talk about whether or not they're worth it, and then also compare them a little bit to soil blocks. So let's do it. All right, first things first. I'm actually going to give you the answer to whether or not I think Winstrips are worth it first, and then we'll get into the nerdy details. So if you just kind of came around, you were wondering what my answer was, let's do that first. So if your standard is cell trays, I believe that Winstrips are a definite step up. And in fact, they're a little bit more expensive, but they will last significantly longer and you'll get a lot better plant starts out of them. Now, if your standard is soil blocks, I believe that Winstrips are a lateral move or maybe even a step down. I explain all of that to follow, but if that answered your question, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll see you later. Go enjoy your day. It may be beautiful, it may be winter. I have no idea when you're watching this. All right, into the video. Winstrips, these were around for a long time and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but they were really hard to get. I remember when I first started farming, everybody talked about Winstrips, but nobody could get them. And maybe they were a little pricey, and I feel like you had to import them. But a few years ago, Connor Crickmore from Neversink Farm brought them back. And people were very excited, including myself, who had never used them, but had heard about them for years. So I bought a bunch of them, and I've been trialing them for the last few years to kind of get a feel for how I like them, especially in comparison to soil blocks. If you've followed this channel for a while, you know that I'm not a big fan of cell tray. To be clear, you can grow great transplants in cell trays, and certainly lots of people do that. But my issue with cell trays was always that you grew it in the cell tray, you kind of had a limited number of days to get it out of the cell tray, otherwise it started to become root bound, and when you did get it out of the cell tray, you had to pop it, so it added a whole extra step. Whereas with soil blocks, you can take that whole tray immediately out of the greenhouse, you know, beyond its general maturity, depending on what crop it is, and then just pull it straight off the tray and put it in the soil. I like that. I've always liked that. But I was attracted to the idea of the Winstrip for a number of reasons. I liked the idea of having something I could do early on that didn't involve me getting out the soil block maker and getting the soil all wet. I also liked the idea of having something I could load up really quickly, like a cell tray, and that would also allow for that flexibility in the season. So if the plant was getting over mature, but my bed wasn't ready, or the previous crop hadn't come out, or whatever, the raining or snowing, or was hungover, or whatever, and I couldn't get the crop out, I liked the idea of having a little bit more flexibility. So let's talk about this design a little bit, because that's where the flexibility comes from. The advantage with soil blocks is air pruning. Now, as you can see here in the Winstrip, you get a little bit of air pruning because those little slats on the side of each cell allow for a little air to come in, and the air pruning is essentially when the roots hit air, they stop growing in circles. So the roots will stop at that point and allow the plant to keep growing, putting its energy into the plant instead of putting its energy into producing winding roots. So that's one of the advantages of these, and that allows you to go a little longer with the crop if you need to, and then, you know, ultimately pull it whenever you need it instead of before it gets root bound. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility, and I like that. I think if there's one thing I don't like about the design, it's these holes. I love those slats in the side of the cell, but these holes in the top of the tray, they actually are kind of obnoxious, because when you put your soil mix in, you lose, what, roughly a quarter of it through those holes just onto whatever's below. And that is that just means that you kind of have to fill these trays twice because you lose so much soil mix in filling them. That's not the end of the world, but it's not my favorite thing. Another thing about the design is there's a lot of space here. There's just a lot of air, which is good for the air pruning, but I find that the bottoms of the Winstrips dry out extremely fast, and that, you know, with a good bottom watering system or a capillary mat or something, that can take care of it a little better. Generally speaking, though, you do have to water these and be careful how you're watering them. If you have a good bottom watering option, that's great. I think that Neversink Farm is releasing soon bottom watering trays for these, but that does add to the cost. So, which is another thing we should talk about. When you look at the site, Neversink Farm site, the Winstrips are going for something like $19 a piece, but that's kind of misleading. That's actually not accurate. Nobody's going to buy a single Winstrip. So really, they start at about 12 a piece for 10, and then they go down from there the more you buy. $12 a piece is a lot of money. It will, you know, but in general, these are going to last you quite a while. So I think that $12 a tray, or, you know, like I said, the price goes down as you buy more. You go in with a bunch of farmers and get a bunch all at once. You can get them, I think, down to $6 or $7. I'll put it on the screen, which is great. That's actually a much more reasonable price, especially if they're going to last you several years, unlike your cell trays. I'm going to skip back to the design for a second, because one thing I forgot to mention is how much I like being able to just pop them out with a finger. You can't really do that with cell trays. You either need a popper or you pull the plant, and I just don't like doing that. I don't feel like that's a very good, I don't feel like the plant loves that. I don't know. I've never enjoyed pulling the plant itself. I'd rather grab the block. So these, you can buy poppers for them. I think Too Bad Cats sells some poppers that you can use for these, but you can generally just use your finger to pop them out, which makes it a little bit faster, but there is still that extra step of having to pop these, unlike the soil blocks, which you can just yank off the tray. And just a general tip, I've found that loading them wet with wet soil mix, it's more effective. You're getting all the wet stuff right into the middle where it's harder to water, and like I said, they dry out easier. So in my experience, it's a little bit more effective to load them with wet soil mix than it is to load them with dry soil mix. And then you don't have to soak them. You don't have to, you know, put a bottom watering tray on them immediately or water them like crazy. You can just go ahead and put your seeds in and they're good to go. What else do I need to say about these? I still like these. I like them early in the spring when I don't feel like busting out all of my soil blocking stuff. But generally speaking, if I'm having to moisten the soil and they're not staying as wet, I still lean probably 75% on soil blocks and about 25% on these trays. They are available, these are 72s. They are also available in 50s and 128s now. When I bought these, they were only available in 72s. So that's kind of cool. I haven't got to try those other ones. I would like to do that at some point. But generally speaking, yes, I think they're worth it in certain circumstances, especially if you're growing specific crops. Like I wouldn't use these 72 trays to grow lettuce, for instance. I would maybe use the 128s that they have, or I would use soil blocks, and that's what we use, soil blocks. But for starting things like tomatoes, I love this. We start the tomatoes early. I can pretty much do it in the house. I load these up. I'm not worried about the roots intermingling. Same thing with cucurbits that have very sensitive roots. I just allow those to grow up and then I pot them up, kind of like I showed in the last video that I did. So just to recap on the pro side, they're relatively fast to load. The trays themselves are extremely long lasting, which I like as somebody who's trying to reduce my plastic usage, especially single time or few time plastic usage. Like cell trays often are like 2 or 3 times and then you're kind of done with that cell tray, which is just an enormous waste of plastic. So I like that these will last quite a bit longer. They are a little bit on the expensive side, but when you weigh that versus how much you're going to be spending on cell trays over time, you know, it may balance out. Staying on the pro side, I like it for things like cucurbits. I like it for the air pruning effect. You do get a little bit of a wrap, but not much. I think it could be redesigned. I think that these need to be like this just needs to be a solid piece of plastic there, more like you would maybe see in a cell tray where there's not that big gap. I like how fast they are to pop. I like that you can pop them with your finger. We tend to grow really robust plants out of these. And like I said, I like that you can extend the greenhouse experience. That's a terrible way of saying that. You can extend your length in the greenhouse and your flexibility a little bit with the Winstrips versus cell trays or, you know, something like that. And maybe even soil blocks. Soil blocks, when they get too entangled, when all the roots start growing into the other blocks, it can be kind of difficult to get them out. And some crops like beets get a little damaged when they get too mature. And sometimes that happens. It just, you know, you don't have your bed space ready, or you've planned something and changed things, or, you know, whatever happened. So I do like that level of flexibility that comes with the Winstrips. Everybody's situation is going to be different. Everybody's preferences are going to be different, but I like Winstrips a lot. They will probably never replace soil blocks on any meaningful level for me, but I like having both of them kind of working together. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions about that. Let me know if you have any thoughts on Winstrips, cell trays, or anything else. Like this video if you like this video. Make sure to subscribe to this channel, to the podcast, to all the things we do. Otherwise, you rock. We'll see you later. As if that was totally as funny as my other videos. I had the freaking wire from my microphone sticking out the whole time. That's a great bit. You just don't have any sense of humor.